Okay, so we're gonna go over the Catalan here, and we're looking at the moves after d4. You play d5, and he plays c4, and you play e6, and then after knight f3, for example, knight f6, he goes g3. The move g3 in the Queen's Gambit signals that White will be playing the Catalan. So before we look at this, though, there are some sidelines that we want to take a look at. So for example, what if he goes like knight f3, knight f6, and then he plays g3 first, right? So what if White doesn't play c4? It's not that bad because after this, you just go pawn to e6. When he goes bishop to g2, you can directly strike in the center with c5. And now if White still doesn't play c4, for example, castles, then knight to c6 and c3, you can get your pieces out pretty easily. And then you can castle as well. I don't think this is very scary. After rook e1, you can trade here, and then move your queen out as well. And if you notice, he'll end up actually getting his bishop stuck inside. And after bishop d7, white can, or black should be able to develop without any problems here. So I don't think this is something you need to be afraid of. But many white players choose the Catalan because in this main line here, after c4, e6, knight f3, knight f6, and g3, white will get a little bit of an advantage here, pretty much no matter how black plays. So after g3, g3, the bishop is going to g2, right? So this is probably one of the only times I'm going to ask you guys to take on c4. Because after you take on c4, I don't think white will play something like e3 and then take the bishop or take the pawn on c4 anymore with his bishop. That just doesn't really happen anymore. Well, he'll go bishop d2 right now. And then after knight c6, then white has a choice. White can either go queen to a4, or he can castle. Let's look at let's look at castling first. After castling, we have a different way of protecting the c4 pawn. In fact, we're expecting to hold this pawn here after castling. So what we need to do is we're going to need to play b5 sometime. But the problem with b5 right now is that he'll have the move knight e5, taking advantage of the pin on the g2 to a diagonal. So what you need to do is you need to play rook to b8 to get your rook out of this diagonal here. And then, after, for example, knight to c3, then you can go b5 yourself. Now, understandably, white will have to open up this diagonal himself as well. So he wants to open this anyway. He'll play knight e5. After trades, then knight to d7, and we're going to counterattack his pawn on e5. If he plays queen to c4, or queen to d4 to protect this pawn, then we go c5 to attack his queen. And after attacking his queen, he can go to queen f4 to keep protecting this pawn, but then we can even put more pressure on that pawn on e5 by playing queen c7. After a4, white needs to continue playing aggressively in order to justify the loss of his pawn on c4. But then you can play a6, and after trades, rook d1, you can finish your development before taking this pawn. And for example, after queen g4, you should play king to f8. Not castling because bishop h6, right? If castles bishop h6, this is something you need to be worried about. So not castling, but instead just king to f8. Black is up a pawn, and as long as you can hold for this moment right now, I think you'll be fine. I don't see that white has any huge threats coming in, but I mean, as you guys can tell, the king can't castle. Black's development is a little bit delayed, so there are problems. White does have compensation for the pawn, but I think black should be able to play this position just fine as well. Going back to the main line, a lot of times white will try to play queen a4 directly and try to win this pawn back. If white does play queen a4, now this is a little bit interesting. The development scheme here is a little bit different because, first of all, black breaks the pin on this knight with the move knight to d7. The idea is that after white takes on c4, black can play knight to b6 and hit the queen on c4 immediately. And once again here, white has a choice about where he can put his queen. He can either put his queen onto b3 or onto b5. Let's look at queen b5. Queen b5 is not something you need to be afraid of, because after queen b5, just a6, and then his queen has to come back to d3 anyway. And now if his queen comes back to d3, we need to find a way to win, well, at least win some play in the center. So we need to play the move e5. If he takes with a knight here, then we just play knight to b4. We don't lose a pawn like this. Knight to b4 after queen d1, we can win the pawn on d4. And if his queen takes our queen, then we have the fork, and we can win the queen back. So if you count the material right now, the material is actually going to be equal. If white continues developing with bishop to e3, we can simply move our knight away. And sure, he can trade with us here and damage our pawn structure, but at the end of the day, material is still equal, and black actually has a pair of bishops in this endgame. Sure, black's bishop here has to defend this pawn on b7 right now, but eventually he can play something like knight d6 and move this bishop out as well. So it's not something that you need to be afraid of. The main line here, though, instead of queen b5, is playing the move queen to d3 immediately, not giving black the move a6. Now after queen d3, you play the move e5 as well, just like in the other line, and white correspondingly plays the move knight takes e5 as well. So this line goes similar to the other line, knight to b4, but here we have options. The options here are after queen takes d4, white is no longer obligated to take the queen. White can choose to either white can choose to take the queen, but play will continue similarly, like this. And then knight to f5. So this is again a completely fine endgame for black. His pieces will develop without any problem. White's king will also be an issue. It's still stuck in the center. And even if it goes to c2, I'm not sure that it's completely safe, because later on black can play bishop to f5 check, and that's going to be interesting for white to solve. So that, yeah, white can transpose into an endgame immediately there, or white can simply play queen takes c7, trying to win a pawn here. But I think this is kind of risky, because after bishop to e6, white might try to take another pawn, and black comes over to rook d8, threatening checkmate on d1. Now, white will stop this checkmate by playing bishop to d6, which is going to force black to play knight to d7, which blocks the queen and rook battery. But even after this move, white may play bishop a4 to guard the c2 and d1 squares. Otherwise, black would have knight to c2 ideas. So he'll play bishop to a4, guarding his king. But then we can play bishop d6, forking the queen and knight. If white plays knight to f3, then we have another very, very sharp move here. The move is knight to d3. The idea is that you give him the knight for free right now. Takes, queen takes, and we're still attacking his queen, and we're attacking his knight at the same time. If he tries to play something like queen to c3, then we can play queen to e4, simply forking this bishop as well. So we win the lost material, and right now, if you count the material, once again, black is only down one pawn here. If black is only down one pawn, he has to, the king's still weak, right? The king is going to be weak. The king needs to move somewhere. If the king doesn't move, for example, bishop e3, then we actually have bishop b4 with serious consequences. So the king needs to move somewhere, and after regaining the bishop, black's position will be completely fine here. Black will be able to castle soon, and this is not something that white will want to get into. So usually white here will play castling to get his king out of the center, which is the problem with him right now. But I think black can also have a very nice position here by trading queens. And after knight takes c3, then you can play bishop d6. The idea of bishop d6 is to attack this knight and develop a piece. White doesn't really have a good way to keep the knight on e5. For example, bishop f4 leads to more awkward situations after the moves f6, for example. So the knight would probably do best to retreat to f3. And simply black can continue his development with bishop to d7. If he attacks your knight away, then you can come to d5. d5, you need to be a little bit careful, because if he moves the knight, then maybe his bishop will be able to attack your knight on d5. But so let's just say he takes, and he plays knight to d4. You also need to watch out that if your knight moves, then he will be able to take your bishop, or your pawn on b7 with his bishop, winning a pawn. But you don't need to move your knight right now, and you can play the move c6. If he wants to trade here, then great. He loses his fianchetto bishop, which controls all these nice light squares, and you have the bishop pair, and he loses the light square control, just for an isolated queen pawn, which is, I think, a bad deal. And if he doesn't take, then simply black can use this half open file for his own use, or for his own advantage. And I don't know what white's going to do about his dark square bishop. If he develops it right now, once again, if he plays e3 later, the bishop will get trapped outside. But if he plays e3 like right now, then his bishop will get trapped inside. So either way, I think white will not have a good solution for his bishop in the future. In general, I think this is very playable for black. Both diagonals are nice and open for him to use. He has this, once again, he has that nice open e-file. and I think his rooks will be able to enjoy either the C and E files or the D and E files, depending on how the pawn structure changes. So remember, in the Catalan, the key is you need to remember some opening moves here. For example, knight to c6 after queen a4, knight to d7. This isn't exactly natural for you to play. You're kind of breaking a couple of opening rules here, right? You're moving two pieces, or you're moving the same piece twice in the opening, and you're retreating it. You're blocking the bishop. You're blocking the queen. This knight to d7 doesn't seem like a normal move. Also, like knight b6, and maybe for you guys, this queen sacrifice here, or I wouldn't really call it a sacrifice, but this tactic here with queen takes d4 isn't something that you would normally see. So you should remember some of these moves. Perhaps even memorize them for now if you have trouble remembering them. But eventually, if you play these moves correctly, you'll get in the middle game that you should be just fine in. Even if earlier, if he doesn't play c4, if he plays a c3 line, that's still nothing to be afraid of. And also, just a side note, if he plays the move c4 here, in case he delays it, then after knight to c6, castling, bishop e7, and for example, c takes, e takes, d takes c, bishop takes c. This is also a playable position for black. He will get a good structure. For example, after castling, white may put pressure on the isolated queen pawn, but after d4, and then followed by trades, knight to e4, and queen to e7. For example, after all these trades are done, black might have an isolated queen pawn, but he has a great amount of space, and I don't think the pawn is going to become a problem in the near future, at least. So if you play c4 there, then you guys can simply just use your regular structure, your simple d5, right, e5, knight f6, knight c6 castle structure. That's fine. Okay, so in general, I think after the Catalan, if you play the correct moves, I think you'll be able to get a good open position, and you shouldn't worry about the white's play in the center.